JP Morgan is currently estimating that the overall economic cost of the California fires will be close to $50 billion. But given the fact that the largest fires remain uncontained and a comprehensive assessment is not expected to happen anytime soon, that number is more than likely to go up, and maybe by a lot. This comes as California attempts to dig itself out of an insurance crisis, one that has been caused in large part by years of wildfires, made increasingly worse by the effects of climate change. Just last year, California's largest home insurer, State Farm, canceled tens of thousands of insurance plans across the state. Nearly 70% of State Farm policyholders in the Pacific Palisades were dropped from their coverage only months ago, and now that very community has been decimated. This phenomenon is not exclusive to the Golden State. In recent years, insurance companies have also begun pulling out of hurricane-prone states, including Florida and Louisiana. And it is certainly possible, even likely, that this trend is going to grow, given the stark reality of climate change. Joining me now is Jeff Goodell, a veteran climate journalist and author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Heat Will Kill You First. Jeff, thank you for being here tonight. I mean, first of all, we haven't begun to grapple with the implications of the State Farm, for example, dropping coverage for 70% of the Pacific Palisades. But this is the future that's upon us. And if anything's a wake-up call, do you think that the insurance company is saying you're no longer insurable? The climate risk is just too high. Is that the wake-up call the country needs?
Well, we hope so.
I mean, do you think it's part of a larger trend? I mean, are we going to see more and more of this?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the risks of living in this new climate, this hotter, more turbulent climate that we're living in now, are not priced into insurance. The insurance risks are escalating quickly. And, you know, you were seeing it around the country. We're seeing Florida, Texas, California, prices doubling, tripling, insurers pulling out. And there's tremendous financial implications to this, because if you have insurers pulling out of a place and you try to go get a mortgage, you can't get it, right? So you then have a real estate market that's driven, you know, by cash, and that changes the housing market in a very profound way. So there's all these sort of domino effects of this rising insurance prices. And it all boils down to this fact that we are not looking squarely in the eye of this new climate that we have created by 150 years of burning fossil fuels. I wonder if this is a moment where people just decide not to rebuild or not to move back, right? Even the people who can afford to do it would be putting themselves squarely in harm's way, whether it's wind or water or fire. You're talking about stretches of the PCH that are on, you know, 100 feet of land going to the sea. These were $85 million homes that are squarely in the path of destruction. I just wonder if we're going to begin to see the real migration that is part of climate change, the inevitable effects of it. I mean, I think that there's no question that this will have an impact on that. I think that people build houses for all kinds of reasons, and everybody is different. Some people can afford to build an $85 million house and then have it burned down every 6 years or something. I mean, there's different.
As feudal as that, Sisyphean as that may seem.
Right, and there's other people who, you know, one time they experience a fire like this and they lose everything, and they're gone because they can't afford to rebuild. They can't afford to take these kinds of risks. I mean, hopefully we'll think differently. There'll be different planning about what fire officials call the wildland urban interface, where you have these buildings in these high risk areas. But ultimately, you know, this is going to be a kind of personal decision for a lot of people. And, you know, I think that it's inevitable that our changed climate is going to change where and how we live.
It would necessitate also cities changing basic infrastructure, right? I mean, having an urban water supply system in an area that is now one where massive wildfires can rip through means changing the way you deliver water.
Totally.
Power lines, which often start these fires, are going to have to be buried, right? Does this not prompt a wholesale reevaluation of the way cities run?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, you know, when we talk about climate change, often we talk about green energy and clean energy and reducing CO2 emissions, which is really important. But an equally important part, or perhaps even more important part of that, is the adaptation side, right? Building cities that are more resilient. One of the reasons that there was a shortage of water for some of these fires is because power went out in some of the water pumps because of the fire. So if you had these water pumps on microgrids and things like that, they weren't so vulnerable to power going out, then you would have better water supply with things like sea level rise, building in different ways with more natural buffers and things from rising seas. There's a whole bunch of ways that we need to rethink how we build our cities and how we live our lives. Because the sort of blunt truth of it is that we have built our world for a climate that no longer exists.
Yeah. We are in a different stage entirely. Well, this is, a devastating moment, but from it, hopefully we will learn some lessons to make ourselves more resilient in the future that awaits us or is on our doorstep, I guess. Jeff Goodell, it's great to have you here. Great to have your perspective. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.